Welcome back, lore hunters. If you're joining us for part 2, you've already been through our deep dive into the hunt for Gollum, covering the backstory, character analyses, predictions, and thematic elements. And if this is your first time here, I'd highly recommend checking out part 1 first, because we built a foundation there that we're going to expand on in some really exciting ways. In part 1, we explored the hunt from a story and character perspective, looking at Aragorn's journey, Gollum's psychology, the themes of heroism and sacrifice, and how this film could work cinematically. But here's the thing about Middle-earth. Every story exists within layers upon layers of history, and every character is part of groups and organizations with their own rich traditions and timelines. So part 2 is where we go deeper into the weeds, and I mean that in the best possible way. We're going to explore the timeline with forensic precision, breaking down exactly when events happen and how they interconnect with everything else occurring in Middle-earth during this period. We're talking dates, sequences, and the intricate web of cause and effect that makes Tolkien's world feel so incredibly real and lived in. But more than that, we're diving deep into group lore. The Dunedain aren't just random rangers. They're the last remnant of ancient kingdoms with traditions stretching back thousands of years. The elves of Mirkwood have their own complex history, their own reasons for being how they are. The forces of evil aren't a monolithic blob but organized hierarchies with their own cultures and motivations. Understanding these groups, their histories, their structures, and how they operate gives us a completely different appreciation for the hunt. Think about it this way. Part 1 was about the what and the why. Part 2 is about the when and the who. When exactly does each phase of the hunt occur relative to other events in Middle-earth? Who are the Dunedain really beyond just Aragorn's ranger buddies? What's the actual structure of Sauron's forces during this period? How do the various factions of Middle-earth relate to each other politically and militarily? We're going to examine the timeline so precisely that you'll understand how Aragorn's hunt for Gollum overlaps with Saruman's breeding of the Uruk-hai, with Gandalf's research in Minas Tirith, with the White Council's last meeting, with Bilbo's gradual decline in Rivendell. All of these things are happening simultaneously, and understanding the timeline helps us see how precarious everything is, how the margins for error are terrifyingly thin. We'll explore the Dunedain in detail, their origins in Numenor, the fall of Arnor and how they survived, their organizational structure, their traditions and codes, their relationship with other peoples. These aren't just skilled woodsmen. They're the bearers of ancient culture, keepers of lore, and the hidden defenders of the North. Their story is one of dignity in exile and purpose without recognition. We're going to look at the woodland realm under Thranduil, understanding the elves' perspective, their long history with darkness in Mirkwood, their isolation and reasons for it, and what it means for them to take on the burden of imprisoning Gollum. The elves aren't background characters. They're ancient beings with their own priorities and painful histories, and we'll examine Sauron's forces in detail. The hierarchy of evil, how orcs are organized and commanded, the role of the Nazgul during this period, the operations out of Dol Guldur and Barad-dûr. Understanding the enemy's structure helps us appreciate the challenges facing those who oppose him and the sophisticated nature of the threat. We're also going to explore some of the deeper lore elements that provide context. The Palantiri and how they're being used, the other rings of power and their status, the history of the Astari and their mission, the significance of ancient places and artifacts that appear in or affect the story. This is where we get into the really rich, detailed world building that makes Tolkien's work so endlessly fascinating. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this sounds incredibly dense and complicated, and you're right, it is, but that's what makes it so rewarding. Tolkien didn't just write adventure stories, he created a world with genuine history, where every element connects to others, where timelines matter and have consequences, where groups and organizations have realistic complexity. Engaging with that depth is what separates casual enjoyment from true appreciation of his work. And here's what's exciting. Understanding this timeline and group lore doesn't just enrich our appreciation of the hunt for Gollum. It transforms how we understand the entire Lord of the Rings story. When you know what the Dunedain have been doing for centuries, Aragorn's arrival at Bree means something different. When you understand the timeline precisely, the urgency of events in Fellowship becomes more apparent. When you know the enemy's organization, the strategic decisions make more sense. So buckle up, because we're about to go on a journey through thousands of years of history, complex organizational structures, and timeline details that will make your head spin in the best way. We're going to connect you didn't even know existed, reveal patterns that make the larger story even more brilliant, and give you the tools to understand Middle-earth at a deeper level than you might have thought possible. This is for the fans who want more than surface-level enjoyment. This is for the people who read the appendices and wish there was even more detail. This is for everyone who's ever wondered about the specific dates, the exact relationships between groups, the detailed timelines that make this world feel so real. This is part 2 and we're going deep. Let's begin with the timeline, because understanding when things happen is crucial to understanding how and why they happen. And trust me, once you see how precisely everything fits together, your mind is going to be blown by Tolkien's attention to detail and the intricate clockwork of his world's history. So sharpen your swords and pack your best long-bottom leaf fellowship. We are continuing our journey. Timeline intricacies. When exactly does this happen? Let's dive deep into the precise timeline of the hunt, because understanding when events occur relative to Middle-earth's larger history adds crucial context to everything we're discussing. The hunt begins sometime after Bilbo's departure from the Shire in 3001 of the Third Age. Gandalf spends several years after the party researching in Minas Tirith, consulting with Saruman, and confirming his worst fears about the ring. It's likely around 3009 or 3010 when Gandalf finally organizes Aragorn to begin actively hunting Gollum. This means roughly 8 to 9 years have passed since Bilbo's birthday. During those intervening years, Gollum has been wandering. He escaped from Mordor sometime around 3017 after being tortured by Sauron's forces. But before his capture by Sauron, he spent years moving through the Misty Mountains and surrounding regions. The timeline suggests Gollum was free for only about a year or two before Aragorn captures him, though Tolkien's notes aren't entirely precise on this point. Aragorn captures Gollum on February 1, 3019, in the Dead Marshes. This is incredibly significant timing, because it's just a few months before Frodo leaves the Shire. The hunt that seemed to take years actually compressed into the final stretch of time before the War of the Ring begins in earnest. This tight timeline adds enormous pressure to Gandalf's efforts. Gollum is brought to Mirkwood and imprisoned there for several months. During this time, Gandalf visits and extracts the crucial testimony about what Sauron learned during the torture. This information confirms Gandalf's fears and makes his actions in the Shire more urgent. The timing means Gandalf is juggling multiple crises simultaneously, researching the ring, securing Gollum, and preparing for what he knows is coming. The escape happens in June of 3018, roughly 4 months before Frodo leaves Bag End. The orc raid on Mirkwood that enables Gollum's escape is likely coordinated from Dol Guldur, possibly at Sauron's direction or at least with his approval. This timing means Gollum is loose again during the crucial months when Gandalf is finalizing plans for the ring's journey to Rivendell. Understanding this timeline reveals how desperately close everything came to disaster. If Aragorn had been slower tracking Gollum, if the capture happened even a few weeks later, Gandalf wouldn't have had time to interrogate him before needing to act on the ring. If Gollum had escaped earlier, he might have led Sauron's forces to the Shire before Frodo departed. The margins are terrifyingly thin. The timeline also shows how events in different parts of Middle-earth interconnect. While Aragorn is hunting Gollum, Saruman is breeding his Uruk-hai in Isengard. Sauron is massing forces in Mordor. The Nazgul are preparing for their mission to find the ring. All these separate threads are moving toward convergence, and the hunt for Gollum is one crucial strand in this larger tapestry. There's also the question of what Aragorn was doing before the hunt began. In previous years, he served in Rohan and Gondor under different names. He's fought alongside Theoden's father and Denethor's father. He's been preparing himself and learning about the lands he'll someday rule. The hunt interrupts but also continues this preparation, teaching him lessons he'll need as king. The film could use title cards or other devices to help audiences track time passage, showing that the hunt spans seasons and years. This prevents confusion about timeline while emphasizing the endurance required. Seeing 3 months later or winter 3018 grounds us in the specific chronology. Tolkien's timeline sometimes has inconsistencies or ambiguities that adaptations must address. Different drafts of his notes give slightly different dates. The film would need to choose which version to follow and commit to it, creating definitive timeline even if scholars might debate details. This is where adaptation becomes interpretation, making choices about contested textual issues. The Ring's history, tracing the One. Understanding the Ring's complete history provides essential context for why the hunt matters so desperately and what forces are at work beneath the surface of events. The One Ring was forged by Sauron in the fires of Mount Doom around the year 1600 of the Second Age. He created it to control the other rings of power, those given to elves, dwarves, and men. Into this ring, Sauron poured much of his own power, making it the greatest of all rings but also binding his fate to its existence. As long as the ring endures, Sauron cannot be truly destroyed. The ring grants its bearer power proportional to their own strength. For someone like Sauron, it enables domination of entire peoples and command of vast forces. For someone weaker, it offers invisibility, extended life, and gradual corruption. But it always seeks to return to its master, influencing its bearer subtly toward actions that serve Sauron whether they realize it or not. The ring was cut from Sauron's hand by Isildur during the Last Alliance's war at the end of the Second Age. Isildur should have destroyed it in Mount Doom's fire where it was forged, the only place hot enough to unmake it. His failure to do so, keeping the ring for himself, doomed Middle-earth to eventual confrontation when Sauron rebuilt his power. Isildur wore the ring for 2 years before it betrayed him. While fleeing from ambush at the Gladden Fields, he put on the ring to escape invisibly through water. But the ring slipped from his finger deliberately, leaving him visible to orc arrows. It wanted to be found, wanted to return to Sauron, and Isildur's death was just a step in that process. The ring lay in the Anduin River for over 2,000 years, lost in mud and darkness, waiting. During this time, Sauron slowly rebuilt his power, but without the ring, he couldn't achieve full strength. Both Sauron and the ring were seeking each other, and eventually the ring called to someone who could move it toward its goal. Degol found the ring while fishing with his friend Smeagol around the year 2463 of the Third Age. The ring immediately began working its corruption. Smeagol murdered Degol to take the ring, his first act of evil under its influence. He called it his precious and hid in the Misty Mountains, where the ring extended his life unnaturally while destroying his mind and body over 5 centuries. The ring influenced Smeagol to move deeper into the mountains, to isolate himself, to become Gollum. It was preparing him to eventually serve its purpose, though what that purpose was remained unclear even to Sauron. The ring has its own will separate from Sauron's, seeking always to return but also acting on immediate opportunities and threats. Bilbo finding the ring in 2941 seemed like accident, but Gandalf later concludes it was meant to happen. The ring wanted to be found, sensed Sauron growing in power, and chose to leave Gollum who had hidden it too well for too long. Bilbo's finding it and bringing it to the Shire was the ring working toward its goal, though in ways even it didn't fully control. For 60 years Bilbo possessed the ring, longer than anyone except Gollum, yet it corrupted him far less. This unusual resistance interests Gandalf and suggests that hobbits have special quality that protects them somewhat from the ring's influence. This is crucial to understanding why Frodo will be chosen to bear it to Mordor. The film could show how the ring's history haunts the present. Every character who knows about it understands they're dealing with artifact that has destroyed everyone who possessed it. The ring isn't just powerful object but malevolent force with its own agency and will. The hunt for Gollum is partly about controlling information about this terrible object's current location. Ancient prophecies and their weight. Prophecy plays significant role in Middle-earth's history, and understanding the relevant prophecies provides context for character motivations and the hunt's larger significance. The most relevant prophecy concerns Isildur's bane and the return of the king. When Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand but failed to destroy it, he doomed his line and set in motion events that would unfold over 3,000 years. Prophecies suggested that the ring would be found again, that Isildur's heir would return, and that final confrontation would determine Middle-earth's fate. Aragorn knows these prophecies. They're part of his heritage and burden. He's aware that he's prophesied to reclaim the throne and unite the kingdoms. But prophecy doesn't guarantee success. It suggests possibility that must be achieved through action. The hunt is part of his preparation, proving himself worthy of his destiny through service and sacrifice. Gandalf understands prophecies differently than mortals. His longer perspective and greater wisdom let him see patterns and connections that others miss. He recognizes signs indicating that crucial time is approaching, that the ring has returned to awareness, that pieces are moving toward final confrontation. The hunt fits into these larger patterns he's tracking. The prophecy of Glorfindel from 1,000 years earlier stated that no man would kill the Witch King of Angmar, leader of the Nazgul. This prophecy isn't directly about the hunt, but it's part of the larger tapestry of foretellings that shape how characters understand their world. Prophecies don't dictate but inform, suggesting possibilities without removing agency. There are elvish prophecies about the fading of their race and eventual departure from Middle-earth. The elves know they're living in ending time, that their age is passing and men's age is beginning. This knowledge affects their willingness to engage with events like the hunt. They're helping shepherd transition while preparing for their own departure. Prophecies about Gundor's kingship include the line, "The hands of the king are the hands of a healer." This connects to Aragorn's healing abilities and foreshadows his eventual revelation as king. During the hunt, his healing skills might save lives or prove his worth, demonstrating qualities the prophecies attribute to true king. The film could include brief mention of prophecies without over-explaining them. Perhaps Gandalf references old words that suggest certain events, or Aragorn mentions prophecies about his line in moment of doubt. These touches acknowledge that characters operate with awareness of these predictions while maintaining focus on immediate action. Prophecy in Tolkien's work operates differently than in some fantasy. It's not absolute predestination but suggestion of likely paths if certain choices are made. The future isn't fixed but unfolds through combination of fate and free will. Characters can fulfill prophecies through their choices or fail to fulfill them through different choices. The ring itself is subject to prophecies. Gandalf mentions that it seems clear Bilbo was meant to find it, and therefore Frodo was meant to have it. This suggests providential design while respecting that Bilbo and Frodo still chose their actions. The hunt protects the ring-bearer who will fulfill prophecies about the ring's ultimate fate, though no one during the hunt knows exactly how that will occur. There's danger in relying too heavily on prophecy. Denethor knows prophecies about Gondor and the king's return, but his despair comes partly from losing faith that prophecies will be fulfilled. Saruman knows prophecies but believes he can manipulate events to his advantage. The film could show this spectrum, different characters relating to prophecy with faith, skepticism, or attempted manipulation. Some prophecies are deliberately ambiguous, capable of multiple interpretations. This protects free will while suggesting destiny. Characters must interpret prophecies and decide how to act on them, another form of choice and responsibility. The hunt happens within this context, both fulfilling ancient predictions and creating conditions for later fulfillments. Creatures of Middle-earth. The hunt's bestiary. Middle-earth is populated by diverse creatures beyond the main characters, and the hunt would bring Aragorn into contact with various beings that enrich the world and create challenges or opportunities. The spiders of Mirkwood are descendants of Ungoliant, the great spider that helped Morgoth destroy the 2 trees of Valinor in the First Age. Her offspring, including Shelob, spread across Middle-earth, and Mirkwood hosts a significant population. These aren't normal spiders but intelligent, malevolent creatures the size of horses or larger. If Aragorn must traverse deep Mirkwood during the hunt, encounters with these spiders would be terrifying and deadly. The film could show a spider encounter, emphasizing their intelligence and sadism. They don't just kill for food but enjoy causing fear and suffering. Their webs are strong as steel cables, and their venom induces paralysis and hallucinations. Fighting them requires fire and sharp steel, and even then success isn't guaranteed. This establishes that the wilderness contains dangers beyond orcs and men. Wargs are giant intelligent wolves that often ally with orcs. They're larger than normal wolves, more vicious, and can understand Orcish speech. During the hunt, Aragorn might face warg packs either independently or with orc riders. These creatures hunt in coordination, using tactics that make them particularly dangerous. The film showing their pack intelligence and size would establish them as serious threats. Huorns are trees that have become conscious and mobile, related to Ents but less fully awakened and more dangerous. The old forest east of the Shire and certain areas of Mirkwood contain Huorns. They're hostile to intruders, attacking anything that threatens trees or moves through their territory. If the hunt takes Aragorn through regions with Huorns, he'd need to move carefully and respectfully, knowing the forest itself might attack. The Barrow Wights haunt the Barrow Downs, ancient burial mounds of the kingdoms of Arnor. These are evil spirits inhabiting corpses, trapping travelers in the barrows and claiming their lives. If Aragorn's hunt takes him through this region, he'd be at risk. The Wights are powerful and difficult to defeat, requiring specific knowledge and courage. This establishes that Middle-earth has supernatural threats beyond physical enemies. Eagles of the Misty Mountains are intelligent beings allied with the Vala, ancient and noble. While they don't appear in every story and prefer not to involve themselves in others' conflicts, they exist in this world and occasionally aid the Free Peoples. The hunt probably doesn't involve eagles directly, but their presence in the world adds to the sense that Middle-earth contains many powers and beings with their own agendas. Creebane are large black crows used by Saruman as spies. They fly in flocks, observing and reporting back to Isengard. During the hunt, Aragorn might notice Creebane watching from a distance, unsure if they're normal birds or Saruman's agents. This paranoia about being observed adds tension and establishes that the hunt isn't happening unnoticed by all powers. The dead men of Dunharrow are cursed spirits doomed to haunt their mountain stronghold for breaking oath to Isildur. They won't factor into the hunt directly, but they exist in Middle-earth during this period, another example of how the past clings to present in this world. Ancient curses still operate, the dead don't always rest easy, and history has physical presence. Fell beasts are the flying creatures the Nazgul ride, though they might not be deployed yet during the hunt's early stages. These pterodactyl-like monsters are products of Sauron's breeding experiments, fearsome and terrifying. If the film wants to include Nazgul presence, showing a fell beast flying overhead, perhaps too distant to be certain what it is, would create dread about the enemy's growing power. River creatures and fish of unusual size exist in Middle-earth's waters. Gollum's preferred hunting grounds would have various aquatic life, and some might be dangerous. The Watcher in the water outside Moria is an extreme example, but smaller versions might exist in other bodies of water. This establishes that even seemingly safe activities like crossing rivers carry risks. The film doesn't need to include all these creatures, but showing the world contains diverse life beyond main characters makes Middle-earth feel vast and real. Each creature has its own history, motivations, and place in the ecology. This biodiversity, both mundane and fantastic, enriches the setting and provides varied challenges during the hunt. The Astari, wizards and their mission. Gandalf is one of the Astari, the 5 wizards sent to Middle-earth to oppose Sauron, and understanding what that means adds depth to his role in the hunt and larger events. The Astari are not men but Maer, immortal spirits of the same order as Sauron himself. They were sent to Middle-earth around the year 1000 of the Third Age by the Vala to help the Free Peoples resist Sauron without directly intervening themselves. Each was given an old man's form to limit their power and encourage them to work through persuasion rather than domination. Gandalf, called Alarin in Valinor, was wisest and most humble of the Mayor sent. He took the form of an old man in gray robes and wandered Middle-earth learning its peoples and places. Unlike Saruman who sought power and influence among the mighty, Gandalf concerned himself with humble folk, hobbits and simple men, understanding that great events often turn on small actions by unlikely heroes. His limitations in mortal form are important to understand. He can't simply use overwhelming power to solve problems. He gets tired, hurt, must eat and sleep like normal men. His magic is real but constrained. He can kindle fire, shine light, break stone, but he's not invincible. The film showing Gandalf's physical limitations makes his achievements more impressive. He succeeds through wisdom and will rather than raw power. The other Astari include Saruman the White, who arrived first and took leadership role until his corruption. Radagast the Brown focuses on animals and nature. The two blue wizards went east and their fates are unknown. This group dynamic matters because Gandalf must work within it, coordinating with Saruman even as he grows suspicious of the White Wizard's motives. Gandalf's mission is specifically to inspire and counsel, not to rule or dominate. He organizes the hunt but doesn't execute it himself, trusting Aragorn to do the work. He shares knowledge but doesn't control how others use it. This methodology reflects the Vala's intent. The free peoples must save themselves with guidance, not be saved by divine intervention. His extended lifespan and experience give him perspective others lack. Gandalf has been in Middle-earth for 2,000 years during the hunt. He's seen kingdoms rise and fall, watched generations of men live and die, accumulated wisdom about Sauron's strategies, and the ring's nature that no mortal could match. This knowledge makes him invaluable coordinator and strategist. But Gandalf isn't omniscient or infallible. He makes mistakes, misses connections, sometimes acts too slowly or too cautiously. His decision-making about when to organize the hunt, how to secure Gollum, whether to trust Saruman, all of these involve judgment calls where he might be wrong. The film showing his uncertainty and doubt makes him more relatable while maintaining his authority as wise guide. The prohibition against the Astari directly confronting Sauron with their full power creates interesting constraints. Gandalf can't just destroy Sauron's forces with devastating magic. He must work through others, enabling their resistance rather than winning the war himself. This limitation is both practical storytelling concern and thematic statement about respecting free will and agency. Gandalf's relationship with hobbits is particularly important to his character and mission. He spent much time in the Shire, befriending hobbits, understanding their strengths and limitations. His belief that Bilbo was meant to find the ring reflects his understanding that hobbits, overlooked and underestimated, have crucial role to play. This connects to the hunt because protecting the Shire from Sauron's attention is partly what the hunt achieves. His staff is both symbol and tool. His focus for his power, allowing him to channel magic more effectively. But it's also just a walking stick, mundane object that becomes special through use. This duality reflects Gandalf himself, immortal spirit in old man's body, extraordinary being choosing to work through ordinary means. The film could explore Gandalf's loneliness. He's surrounded by mortals who age and die while he endures. His closest peers are other Astari, and Saruman has fallen to corruption. He can't fully share his burdens with anyone because few would understand the scope of what he knows and fears. This isolation, particularly poignant during the hunt when so much depends on his judgment, adds tragic dimension to his character. The Dunedain Legacy. Numenor's Long Shadow. The Dunedain are defined by their connection to Numenor, the great island kingdom that fell millennia before, and understanding this legacy is crucial to understanding Aragorn and his rangers. Numenor was the greatest realm of men in Middle-earth's history, an island kingdom given to the Edain as reward for their service in the wars against Morgoth. The Númenóreans achieved heights of civilization, wisdom, and power that have never been matched since. They lived far longer than other men, built wonders of architecture and craft, and sailed their ships to all corners of Middle-earth. But Númenor fell through pride and corruption. Sauron, captured and brought to Númenor as prisoner, corrupted the kingdom from within, turning the Númenóreans against the Vala and leading them to attempt invasion of Valinor itself. The Vala responded by destroying Númenor utterly, sinking the entire island beneath the sea. Only the faithful, those who resisted corruption, escaped to Middle-earth and founded the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor. Aragorn is direct descendant of Elendil, who led the faithful to Middle-earth. His bloodline carries Númenorian heritage, giving him extended lifespan, greater height and strength than common men, and claim to kingship of both Gondor and Arnor. But that heritage is also burden, reminder of fallen greatness and responsibility to do better than his ancestors. The Dúnedain are the remnant of Arnor's kingdom, which itself fragmented and fell centuries ago. They're all that's left of the northern line of Númenor, a people without kingdom or land, maintaining their identity and purpose through sheer determination. The film could explore what this means psychologically, being heir to greatness but living in poverty and obscurity. Their extended lifespans, while not as long as the Númenóreans of old, still set them apart. Aragorn is 87 during the hunt but appears to be in his prime. He could live to be 200 or more if not killed. This longevity gives the Dúnedain long memory and patience that normal men lack, but also means they watch shorter-lived people's age and die around them. The physical markers of their heritage include greater height, gray eyes that seem to see far, and bearing that marks them as different even when dressed as common rangers. Aragorn can't fully hide what he is. People sense nobility even when he's dirty and weathered from the road. This creates both advantage and vulnerability. He's memorable and therefore more easily tracked by enemies. The film could show Aragorn's complex relationship with his heritage. He's proud of his lineage but also aware of how Númenor fell through pride and corruption. He must honor his ancestors while not repeating their mistakes. This tension between pride and humility, between claiming heritage and avoiding arrogance, shapes his character and decisions. The Dúnedain maintain traditions from Númenor and Arnor despite having no kingdom. They speak Sindarin, the ancient language. They remember the history and lore. They train their children in the old ways. This cultural preservation is active resistance against erasure, insisting that they still matter even when the world has largely forgotten them. Their relationship with elves stems from Númenorian history. The first Númenorians were close allies of elves, and many had elven ancestry far back in their bloodlines. Aragorn himself has elvish ancestors through Elros, Elrond's brother. This connection explains why Aragorn was raised in Rivendell and why he can move between human and elvish worlds more easily than most men. The film could explore the Dúnedain's knowledge of ancient lore and history. They remember events from thousands of years ago through oral tradition and written records they've preserved. This deep historical memory informs their understanding of current threats. They recognize patterns and connections that shorter-lived peoples miss. Aragorn tracking Gollum isn't just tracking a creature. It's understanding how this moment fits into vast historical sweep. There's tragedy in being last remnant of greatness. The Dúnedain know what their people once were, the heights they achieved, and they see how far they've fallen. Yet they persist in their duties, protecting peoples who don't know they exist, maintaining standards and honor that belong to fallen kingdoms. This dignity in diminishment is deeply moving and speaks to themes about what endures when external power is lost. The Palantiri, seeing stones and their role. The Palantiri, the 7 seeing stones of Númenor, play important but often overlooked role in events leading to the War of the Ring, and understanding them enriches our comprehension of the hunt's context. The Palantiri were created in Valinor during the First Age and brought to Middle-earth by the Númenóreans. There were originally 7 stones placed in various locations across Gondor and Arnor. By the time of the hunt, most are lost or hidden, but at least 3 are still in use. One in Minas Tirith held by Denethor, one in Orthanc held by Saruman, and one in Barad-dûr held by Sauron. These stones allow communication and vision across vast distances, but they're also dangerous. Sauron, possessing the Master Stone from the Tower of Barad-dûr, can influence what other stones show and can sometimes dominate the wills of those using them. This is how he's corrupting both Saruman and Denethor, though neither fully realizes they're being manipulated. During the time of the hunt, Saruman is regularly using his Palantir to communicate with Sauron, though he believes he's clever enough to resist corruption. He's gathering information while trying to hide his own plans to find the ring for himself. What Saruman sees through his stone might include glimpses of the hunt for Gollum, Sauron's forces searching, perhaps even indirect evidence of Aragorn's movements. Denethor is also using the Minas Tirith stone, though less frequently than Saruman. What he sees drives him toward despair, Sauron's growing armies, the darkness spreading, the apparent hopelessness of resistance. During the hunt's time frame, Denethor is beginning his descent into the paranoia and fatalism that will eventually destroy him. The stone shows him truth, but selective truth designed to break his will. The film could include brief scenes showing these Palantir communications. Perhaps we see Saruman in Orthanc, hand on the stone, his face illuminated by its light, seeing something that makes him smile cruelly. Or Denethor in Minas Tirith, looking into the stone and seeing Mordor's armies, his expression growing more troubled. These glimpses would connect the hunt to larger events without explaining everything explicitly. Gandalf doesn't use a Palantir during this period, though he knows of their existence and danger. His caution about these stones is proven wise by what happens to both Saruman and Denethor. The wizard relies on other methods: his own travel, his network of informants, his wisdom and intuition. This contrast between Gandalf's patient methodology and others' reliance on the danger stones reveals different approaches to gathering intelligence. The Palantiri represent a theme of knowledge being double-edged. They grant vision but also expose the viewer to Sauron's influence. They provide information but can also provide disinformation. This connects to broader themes about how characters in the hunt must evaluate information sources, determine what's true, and resist manipulation. There's tragic irony in how the Palantiri, created as tools for good governance and communication across the Númenórean realms, become instruments of corruption and defeat. This reflects larger patterns in Middle-earth where powerful tools created for noble purposes are perverted by evil. The ring is ultimate example, but the stones show this pattern operating at smaller scale. If Saruman has any awareness of the hunt through his stone, he would be intensely interested but careful not to reveal this interest to Sauron. He's playing his own game, wanting to find the ring himself, which means he needs Gollum found but not by Sauron. This complex maneuvering could explain some of the obstacles Aragorn faces, Saruman subtly interfering without making his involvement obvious. The existence of the stones also explains how Sauron coordinates his far-flung forces so effectively. He can communicate instantly with servants who have access to stones or other means of receiving his will. This gives the enemy significant advantage in organizing his search for Gollum and later for the ring. The Free Peoples lack this instantaneous communication, relying instead on riders and messages that take days or weeks to deliver. The film showing these stones, even briefly, adds layers to understanding Middle-earth's geopolitics. It's not just armies and borders but also information networks and intelligence gathering. The hunt for Gollum happens within this context of various powers watching and communicating, trying to gain advantage through superior knowledge and faster response to changing situations. The unreliable narrator. Whose story is this? An interesting creative choice the film could make is considering perspective and whose version of events we're seeing, because every story is told from a particular viewpoint that shapes what we see and how we see it. The most straightforward approach is Aragorn's perspective. We follow him primarily, see events through his eyes, understand his thoughts and motivations most clearly. This makes him protagonist and provides stable viewpoint for audiences to anchor on. His perception is presumably reliable, he's not delusional or deceptive, so what he sees is what happened. This traditional approach works but is also somewhat predictable. But what if the film occasionally shifts to Gollum's perspective? His view of events would be skewed by his fractured psychology, his paranoia, his obsession with the ring. The same events Aragorn sees as necessary pursuit, Gollum experiences as persecution and terror. Neither view is wrong, they're different truths from different positions. This dual perspective creates complexity and empathy for both characters. Gandalf could serve as framing narrator, telling the story to someone years later, perhaps at the Council of Elrond or to Frodo. This frame device allows for reflection and context. Gandalf can comment on events' significance that participants didn't understand at the time. But it also raises questions about memory and interpretation. Is Gandalf's version entirely accurate, or has it been shaped by time and subsequent knowledge? The film could play with temporal perspective, showing events out of chronological order to create specific effects. Perhaps we see Gollum's imprisonment before showing the hunt that led to it, creating questions that the hunt then answers. Or we intercut between hunt and imprisonment, drawing parallels and contrasts. This non-linear approach requires careful execution but can create richer narrative texture. There's possibility of unreliable elements even from Aragorn. Perhaps exhaustion, isolation, and stress cause him to experience things unclearly. Maybe he has fevered dreams or moments where reality blurs with imagination. Not enough to undermine the story's basic facts, but enough to acknowledge that human perception is fallible, especially under extreme conditions. This adds psychological complexity while keeping the core narrative reliable. The Dunedain oral tradition could be another framing device. Perhaps we're seeing the story as rangers tell it to each other, which might include embellishments or simplifications. The truth would be somewhat obscured by the telling, though the essential events remain clear. This acknowledges that all history is interpretation, even when based on real events. Different characters might misunderstand same events. Thranduil might view Gollum's imprisonment as successful cooperation, while Gandalf sees it as necessary but ultimately failed security measure. Gollum might interpret his imprisonment as unjust persecution, while the elves see it as merciful necessity. These varying interpretations of same facts show how perspective shapes understanding without requiring actual unreliable narration. The film could include brief moments where we can't be sure what happened. Perhaps during the capture, in the chaos and violence, details are unclear. Did Gollum try to kill Aragorn, or was he only defending himself? Did Aragorn use more force than necessary, or exactly what was needed? These ambiguities acknowledge that even participants in events don't always have perfect clarity about what occurred. There's also question of what's shown versus what's told. If the film includes narration, there might be gaps where narrator says something happened but we don't see it. These gaps invite audiences to imagine, to fill in blanks with their own visualization. This collaborative storytelling between film and audience can be more engaging than showing everything explicitly. The meta-question is whether objective truth exists in narrative or if all stories are someone's version of events. The film doesn't need to resolve this philosophically, but acknowledging it adds sophistication. Maybe the closing moment suggests multiple valid interpretations, leaving audiences to decide whose perspective they trust most or whether truth lies somewhere between all viewpoints. Language and linguistics. The power of words. Tolkien was a linguist before he was a novelist, and his love of language permeates Middle-earth. This film has opportunity to engage with linguistic elements in ways that enrich the world-building and thematic depth. The languages spoken during the hunt would be varied. Aragorn speaks Westron, the common tongue, but also Sindarin from his time among elves, and probably fragments of many other languages picked up through his travels. When tracking Gollum through different regions, he'd need to communicate with various peoples in their languages or dialects. The film could show this linguistic flexibility, Aragorn switching between tongues as needed, demonstrating his cultural adaptability. Gollum's language is particularly interesting. He speaks a degraded form of language, mixing old Hobbitish words with corruptions developed during centuries alone. His syntax is broken, his vocabulary limited to immediate concerns: food, water, the precious, enemies, hiding. The film could use his language to show his mental state, noting when Smeagol speaks more coherently versus Gollum's more fragmented speech patterns. Elvish languages carry weight and history. When elves speak Sindarin in Mirkwood, it should feel ancient and beautiful, contrasting sharply with Orcish speech or Gollum's degraded muttering. The film doesn't need to translate everything, sometimes letting audiences hear the music of Elvish without understanding every word, trusting that tone and context convey meaning. Names have power in Tolkien's world. Aragorn uses multiple names: Strider to common folk, Estel among elves, his true name Aragorn only to those he trusts. This multiplicity reflects both security concerns and identity complexity. The film could explore this, showing how Aragorn introduces himself differently in different contexts, and what it means when he reveals his true name. The black speech of Mordor is language of evil, corrupted tongue that hurts to hear. If orcs speak it during the film, it should sound harsh and ugly, phonetically aggressive. The film could use language as shorthand for moral alignment, beautiful languages associated with good, ugly languages with evil, though this risks oversimplification that Tolkien himself sometimes fell into. There's power in what's left unsaid. The Dunedain might have signals or codes, ways of communicating information without speaking openly where enemies might hear. Perhaps they use ranger signs left on trees or rocks, a language of marks that only they can read. The film showing these nonverbal communications adds depth to their culture and practical methodology. Translation issues could create plot points. When Aragorn interrogates someone who saw Gollum, language barriers might obscure details. A word that translates multiple ways could lead to confusion about where Gollum went. These linguistic complications add realistic difficulty to gathering intelligence and show how language shapes understanding. The film could include a moment where Aragorn speaks to Gollum in an old form of Hobbitish, words from before Smeagol's corruption, trying to reach the person he once was through language. Gollum's response to hearing this ancient tongue could reveal his inner conflict, Smeagol stirring at sounds he hasn't heard in centuries. Language becomes tool for psychological intervention. Gandalf's speech patterns reflect his nature. He speaks many languages fluently, shifting effortlessly between them, but he also knows when to simplify and when to speak formally. His linguistic choices reveal his relationship with whoever he's addressing. Casual with Aragorn, who he trusts, more formal with Thranduil, who he respects but doesn't know as well, simplified when speaking to common folk who need to understand quickly. The film could touch on how language preserves history. The Dunedain maintain Sindarin knowledge despite being scattered and diminished, keeping alive their connection to the ancient kingdoms. This linguistic preservation is an act of cultural resistance, refusing to let their heritage disappear even when their kingdoms have fallen. Language becomes political and spiritual, not just practical. Written language could appear in the film through various means. Perhaps Aragorn keeps a journal in Sindarin, recording the hunt's progress. Maybe Gandalf sends messages in runes that only certain recipients can read. The film showing these written forms adds visual interest while demonstrating that Middle-earth has multiple writing systems, each with its own history and associations. There's something profound about language as bridge between beings. When Aragorn speaks gently to captured Gollum, using words carefully chosen to minimize distress, language becomes tool of mercy. When orcs bark commands at each other, language is weapon of domination. The film could explore this duality, how same capacity for speech can serve vastly different purposes depending on speaker's intent. Meta-narrative considerations. A prequel's unique position. This film occupies interesting space as prequel to beloved story, and that positioning creates unique opportunities and challenges worth examining. Prequels often suffer from tension problems because audiences know major characters survive. But this film can use that knowledge productively. We know Aragorn survives and becomes king, but we don't know what it costs him, what he endures, how close he comes to failure. The film can create tension through suffering rather than survival, through possibility of mission failure rather than character death. The film has advantage of established emotional investment. Audiences already love Aragorn, Gandalf, and even have complex feelings about Gollum. The filmmakers don't need to make us care about these characters from scratch. They can build on existing attachment. This allows starting the story in medias res, trusting audiences to engage immediately because they already know and love who's involved. But there's danger of over-reliance on nostalgia. If the film is just remember these characters you loved, it fails as standalone story. It must work for hypothetical viewer who hasn't seen the trilogy, telling complete narrative with satisfying arc while also rewarding longtime fans with deeper connections and references. This balance is difficult but essential. The film can provide retroactive depth to original trilogy. Seeing what Aragorn endured during the hunt enriches our understanding of his character in Fellowship. Knowing why Gandalf is so concerned about the ring in Fellowship makes sense after seeing the hunt. Gollum's later behavior gains context from seeing his imprisonment and escape. These connections enhance both stories without being necessary to understand either. There's question of tone consistency versus distinction. Should this film match the trilogy's epic tone, or establish something different? The material suggests different approach, more intimate and grounded, but too much divergence might alienate audiences expecting certain Middle-earth feel. Finding the sweet spot where it feels connected but fresh requires careful calibration. Prequels risk explaining things better left mysterious. Part of Aragorn's appeal in Fellowship is his mysterious competence, and too much backstory could diminish that. The film must provide insight without over-explaining, showing formative experiences while preserving some mystery about the character. Not everything needs answered. Some questions are more interesting than their answers. The film can correct or expand on original trilogy's omissions. The books include content about the hunt that films couldn't cover, and this story rectifies that. It can also address fan questions and curiosities, providing satisfying elaboration on events previously only referenced. This fan service, done well, validates audience investment in the world. There's opportunity to set up future stories. If successful, this film could launch series exploring other untold Middle-earth tales. It can establish template for how to tell smaller-scale stories in this world, proving there's appetite for Middle-earth content beyond main trilogy narrative. This positioning as possible franchise starter affects production and storytelling choices. The film must manage expectations about scope and scale. Some audiences might expect Fellowship-level spectacle throughout. Marketing and the film itself must properly set expectations, making clear this is different kind of story, still epic in implications but more intimate in execution. Disappointment often comes from mismatched expectations rather than actual quality. Anniversary timing and cultural moment matter. Lord of the Rings films came out in specific cultural moment, post 9/11 anxiety and desire for clear moral struggles. This film arrives in different moment, and it might resonate differently. The themes of persistence through difficulty, of unglamorous necessary work, of guarding against creeping darkness, these might speak particularly well to current moments' concerns. The unreliable narrator. Whose story is this? An interesting creative choice the film could make is considering perspective and whose version of events we're seeing, because every story is told from a particular viewpoint that shapes what we see and how we see it. The most straightforward approach is Aragorn's perspective. We follow him primarily, see events through his eyes, understand his thoughts and motivations most clearly. This makes him protagonist and provides stable viewpoint for audiences to anchor on. His perception is presumably reliable, he's not delusional or deceptive, so what he sees is what happened. This traditional approach works but is also somewhat predictable. But what if the film occasionally shifts to Gollum's perspective? His view of events would be skewed by his fractured psychology, his paranoia, his obsession with the ring. The same events Aragorn sees as necessary pursuit, Gollum experiences as persecution and terror. Neither view is wrong, they're different truths from different positions. This dual perspective creates complexity and empathy for both characters. Gandalf could serve as framing narrator, telling the story to someone years later, perhaps at the Council of Elrond or to Frodo. This frame device allows for reflection and context. Gandalf can comment on events' significance that participants didn't understand at the time. But it also raises questions about memory and interpretation. Is Gandalf's version entirely accurate, or has it been shaped by time and subsequent knowledge? The film could play with temporal perspective, showing events out of chronological order to create specific effects. Perhaps we see Gollum's imprisonment before showing the hunt that led to it, creating questions that the hunt then answers. Or we intercut between hunt and imprisonment, drawing parallels and contrasts. This non-linear approach requires careful execution but can create richer narrative texture. There's possibility of unreliable elements even from Aragorn. Perhaps exhaustion, isolation, and stress cause him to experience things unclearly. Maybe he has fevered dreams or moments where reality blurs with imagination. Not enough to undermine the story's basic facts, but enough to acknowledge that human perception is fallible, especially under extreme conditions. This adds psychological complexity while keeping the core narrative reliable. The Dunedain oral tradition could be another framing device. Perhaps we're seeing the story as rangers tell it to each other, which might include embellishments or simplifications. The truth would be somewhat obscured by the telling, though the essential events remain clear. This acknowledges that all history is interpretation, even when based on real events. Different characters might misunderstand same events. Thranduil might view Gollum's imprisonment as successful cooperation, while Gandalf sees it as necessary but ultimately failed security measure. Gollum might interpret his imprisonment as unjust persecution, while the elves see it as merciful necessity. These varying interpretations of same facts show how perspective shapes understanding without requiring actual unreliable narration. The film could include brief moments where we can't be sure what happened. Perhaps during the capture, in the chaos and violence, details are unclear. Did Gollum try to kill Aragorn, or was he only defending himself? Did Aragorn use more force than necessary, or exactly what was needed? These ambiguities acknowledge that even participants in events don't always have perfect clarity about what occurred. There's also a question of what's shown versus what's told. If the film includes narration, there might be gaps where narrator says something happened but we don't see it. These gaps invite audiences to imagine, to fill in blanks with their own visualization. This collaborative storytelling between film and audience can be more engaging than showing everything explicitly. The meta-question is whether objective truth exists in narrative or if all stories are someone's version of events. The film doesn't need to resolve this philosophically, but acknowledging it adds sophistication. Maybe the closing moment suggests multiple valid interpretations, leaving audiences to decide whose perspective they trust most or whether truth lies somewhere between all viewpoints. The economics of the hunt, resources and costs. Let's examine the practical economics of mounting a manhunt across Middle-earth, because even fantasy operations require resources and planning. The Dunedain operate on essentially no budget. They're not funded by any government or wealthy patron. They support themselves through whatever work they can find while maintaining their ranger duties. This means Aragorn during the hunt has minimal resources. He carries what he can, relies on living off the land, occasionally buys or trades for supplies when he passes through settlements. The film could show this constrained operation, emphasizing ingenuity and self-sufficiency. Supplies are constant concern. Food, especially during winter or in barren regions, must be carefully managed. Weapons and equipment need maintenance and occasional replacement. Clothing wears out. These mundane concerns affect strategic decisions. Aragorn might need to detour to a town for supplies, losing time on Gollum's trail. These practical limitations make the hunt feel real and add naturalistic obstacles. The film could show Aragorn's resource management skills. Perhaps he maintains supply caches in strategic locations, places he's hidden food and equipment over years of ranging. Or he has arrangements with certain merchants or innkeepers, people who help the rangers because they understand the protection being provided even if they don't know details. These networks illustrate how the Dunedain make their shoestring operation function. Information has economic value. Aragorn might need to pay for testimony from witnesses who saw Gollum, or trade services for information. A farmer who provides a crucial clue might ask Aragorn to deal with a wolf problem in exchange. These barter arrangements show how currency in Middle-earth isn't just coin but skills, favors, and mutual obligations. Opportunity costs are significant. Every day Aragorn spends hunting Gollum is a day he's not earning wages, not helping other rangers protect villages, not doing the other 100 tasks that need doing. For the Dunedain as group, having their most skilled member dedicated to single mission for months or years represents major resource allocation. The film could touch on this, perhaps other rangers discussing how they're stretched thin covering duties Aragorn usually handles. Mirkwood's imprisonment of Gollum represents economic burden on the realm. Guards must be assigned, fed, housed while watching the prisoner. Gollum himself needs food and water. The security measures required have costs. Over years, these expenses add up. The film might show Thranduil discussing budget implications with advisors, the practical costs of mercy and doing the right thing. Sauron's hunt for Gollum also requires resources. Orcs must be dispatched, paid or fed or motivated through fear. Intelligence networks cost money or favors. The agents Sauron employs, human or otherwise, expect compensation. Even vast evil empires operate on some kind of economy, and the film could briefly acknowledge these costs, showing that even Sauron must allocate limited resources among competing priorities. The film could contrast resource levels between sides. Sauron can throw substantially more resources at recapturing Gollum than Aragorn has for finding him. But Aragorn has advantages that aren't economic: skill, knowledge of terrain, motivation beyond fear. This underdog dynamic, skilled individual against better-funded opposition, adds tension and makes eventual success more satisfying. Travel costs money or at least effort. Horses need to be acquired, either purchased or borrowed, and they need feeding and care. River crossings might require paying ferrymen. Some roads charge tolls. The film showing these practical transactions grounds the fantasy, reminding us this is a functional world with economic systems, not just a backdrop for adventure. The value of success is incalculable but real. If Aragorn fails, if Gollum reveals the Shire's location to Sauron, the economic and human costs would be catastrophic. Entire regions would be destroyed, populations killed or enslaved, the free people's economies shattered. From pure cost-benefit analysis, spending significant resources on the hunt makes sense even if individuals making those choices don't consciously calculate it that way. Practical filmmaking challenges. Bringing this story to. Let's discuss some of the practical challenges of actually making this film and how filmmakers might address them to create successful adaptation. The first major challenge is maintaining tension when audiences know the outcome. We know Aragorn catches Gollum, know he's imprisoned in Mirkwood, know he'll eventually escape. The film must create tension through execution rather than mystery about results. This requires focusing on how events unfold, the cost paid, the near misses and narrow victories, making the journey compelling even when the destination is known. Pacing is particularly tricky. Too fast and the film feels rushed, not giving weight to the hunt's difficulty. Too slow and audiences get restless, wanting more action or plot progression. The film needs rhythm that alternates between contemplative tracking sequences and tense action, between character moments and plot advancement. Finding this balance requires skillful editing and willingness to trust the material. The Andy Serkis factor is both asset and challenge. He's perfect for Gollum, reprising his iconic performance, but he's also directing. Can he effectively direct himself in a demanding dual role? The production would need strong support structure, perhaps a co-director or very experienced first AD who can provide objective feedback on his performance while he's focused on directing other elements. Budget allocation requires careful planning. This film doesn't need massive CGI battles or huge set pieces, but it needs excellent creature work for Gollum, extensive location shooting across varied terrain, and probably some large-scale sequences like the Mirkwood Orc raid. The filmmakers must prioritize spending where it matters most, possibly saving money on scale to invest in performance and atmosphere. Weather and location shooting present enormous challenges. The film requires convincing portrayals of dead marshes, deep forests, mountains, and more. Some can be sound stages, but much needs real locations for authenticity. This means dealing with unpredictable weather, difficult access, and logistical nightmares of moving cast and crew through challenging terrain. New Zealand offers great locations, but production must be strategic about when and where to shoot. The screenplay structure is unusual for fantasy film. There's no traditional three-act arc with clear midpoint and climax. The hunt is sustained pursuit with rising and falling tension, multiple setbacks and advances, building to capture that's intense but not a battle. Writers must make the structure work without forcing artificial dramatic beats that would feel false to the story's nature. Character dialogue requires careful calibration. Aragorn isn't particularly talkative, Gollum speaks in established patterns. Much of the film could be quite sparse with dialogue. But modern audiences expect a certain amount of verbal exposition and character development. The screenplay must balance naturalistic silence with providing enough dialogue to keep audiences engaged and informed. The film needs strong supporting cast even in small roles. Every ranger, elf, villager, and orc must feel real and lived in. This requires good actors even in minor parts and direction that treats every character as important. The temptation to phone in supporting performances must be resisted because they provide texture that makes the world feel real. Marketing this film will be challenging. It's not an easy sell. Watch Aragorn track Gollum for 2 hours doesn't immediately grab casual audiences. The marketing must emphasize connection to beloved characters from the trilogy while establishing the story's unique identity and stakes. Trailers must convey tension and scope without misleading about the film's actual nature. The runtime is a question mark. This story could work at 2 hours or could justify 2.5+ if filmmakers want to really explore character and world. Studio pressure might push for shorter runtime, but this particular story benefits from patience and spaciousness. Finding the right length requires honest assessment of what serves the story versus what serves commercial considerations. There's also question of how much to reference original trilogy. Too many callbacks feel cheap and pandering. Too few and the film feels disconnected. The balance is showing this as same world and characters we loved while telling a distinct story that stands on its own merits. This requires restraint and confidence in the material. Tolkien's Catholic themes: grace and providence. Tolkien was a devout Catholic, and his faith deeply influenced his work. This film can engage with these spiritual themes in ways that enrich the story without being preachy or exclusionary to audiences of different beliefs. The concept of grace is central to Catholic theology and present throughout Tolkien's work. Grace is unearned favor, mercy that isn't deserved. Gollum receiving mercy rather than execution represents grace. He's done terrible things and deserves punishment, but Gandalf and Aragorn show him mercy anyway, not because he's earned it but because mercy itself has value. This reflects Christian ideas about grace, that all beings are flawed and survival depends on receiving mercy we don't deserve. The film could explore this through Aragorn's internal struggle. Part of him might want vengeance on Gollum for the difficulty of the hunt, for the deaths of rangers, for all the trouble this creature has caused. But he chooses mercy despite these feelings, acting from principle rather than emotion. This choice reflects Catholic teaching about rising above natural inclinations to act from higher moral framework. Providence, the idea that events unfold according to divine plan even when we can't see it, is deeply embedded in Tolkien's worldview. Gandalf's statement that Bilbo was meant to find the ring expresses this belief. The film could engage with providence through Gandalf's perspective, showing his faith that despite setbacks and dangers, events are moving toward necessary resolution even when the path is unclear. But providence in Tolkien's world doesn't eliminate free will or reduce characters to puppets. They make real choices with real consequences. The film should balance providential design with genuine agency, showing that while events might be meant to happen, they happen through free beings making difficult choices. This theological complexity, divine plan achieved through free will rather than despite it, enriches the narrative. The theme of redemption runs through Catholic theology and this story. Can Gollum be redeemed? The question remains open, suggesting possibility without guaranteeing outcome. Catholic belief holds that redemption is always possible while alive, that no one is beyond saving though many choose damnation. The film could engage this theme without resolving it, leaving Gollum's ultimate fate to later stories while establishing that even he hasn't passed beyond all hope. Suffering has particular meaning in Catholic framework, seen not as pointless but as potentially redemptive or educational. Aragorn's suffering during the hunt shapes him into better leader. Gollum's suffering is consequence of his choices but might also crack open possibility for change. The film shouldn't glorify suffering, but can show it having meaning and purpose rather than being mere random cruelty. The concept of vocation, being called to specific purpose, is deeply Catholic and applies to Aragorn. He's literally called to be king but must first prove worthy through service and sacrifice. The hunt is part of his formation, preparation for larger calling. This idea that our struggles prepare us for purposes we don't yet understand resonates with Catholic teaching about God's plan for individuals. Community and fellowship matter deeply in both Catholicism and Tolkien's work. The Dunedain Brotherhood, the coordinated effort against darkness, the way different peoples must cooperate, all reflect belief that we're not meant to face challenges alone. The The film could emphasize these communal aspects, showing that even heroic individuals operate within networks of support and shared purpose. The film should present these themes naturally through story rather than explicitly preaching them. Audiences from different belief systems can engage with grace, providence, redemption, and vocation as narrative elements without requiring specific theological interpretation. But for those familiar with Catholic thought, the deeper resonances will be recognizable and meaningful. There's also room to explore doubt and difficulty of faith. Gandalf might express moments of uncertainty, wondering if his interpretation of events is correct, if his strategies will work, if providence is truly operating. These doubts don't negate faith but make it more relatable and honest. Faith in Tolkien's world, as in Catholicism, isn't absence of doubt but perseverance despite it. Mentorship and legacy. Passing knowledge forward. One of the rich undercurrents in this story is how knowledge, wisdom, and skill pass between generations, and exploring these mentorship dynamics adds depth to understanding Middle-earth's continuity. Gandalf serves as Aragorn's mentor, though their relationship is more collaborative than hierarchical given Aragorn's age and experience. The wizard guides without commanding, suggests without ordering, trusts Aragorn's judgment while providing broader context. This mentorship model respects both parties, recognizing that wisdom comes in different forms and that even teachers learn from students. The film could show specific teaching moments. Perhaps Gandalf explains something about the ring's history or the enemy's methods, not lecturing but sharing knowledge. Aragorn needs to make good decisions. Or maybe Aragorn demonstrates tracking skills that even Gandalf finds impressive, showing that mentorship flows both directions. These exchanges reveal character while advancing plot. Aragorn serves as mentor to younger Dunedain rangers. The film might show him training others in tracking, in survival, in the ranger's code of duty before self. These teaching moments aren't just practical instruction, they're transmission of values and philosophy. Aragorn is preparing the next generation to carry on the work of protecting the North, ensuring the tradition continues beyond his eventual departure. There's poignancy in this mentorship, knowing Aragorn's destiny. He's training rangers to continue work he'll eventually leave behind when he claims kingship. He's investing in a tradition he won't always be part of, ensuring its survival regardless of his personal trajectory. This selflessness in mentorship, preparing others to continue work you might not be there to see, reflects mature leadership. Elves mentor through different methods, having lived for ages and accumulated vast knowledge. An elf might teach simply by demonstrating, by allowing others to observe perfected technique. Or they might share stories from centuries past, using history as teaching tool. The film could show these elvish teaching methods contrasting with human approaches, highlighting cultural differences while showing multiple valid paths to wisdom. Gollum represents what happens when chains of mentorship break. He lived alone for centuries, untaught and unteachable, accumulating survival skills but no wisdom, no moral framework. His isolation prevented growth, leaving him stunted and twisted. This negative example shows why mentorship matters, why beings need connection and guidance to develop properly. The film could include an elder Dunedain, someone who trained Aragorn's father or even Aragorn himself in youth, now too old for field work but still contributing through counsel. This elder represents living history, connecting present to past, showing how traditions survive through human chains of teaching and learning. A scene where Aragorn seeks this elder's advice, showing respect for accumulated wisdom, would demonstrate the value he places on mentorship. There's also self-mentorship, the way characters learn from their own experiences and mistakes. Aragorn analyzing what went wrong when he lost Gollum's trail, figuring out how to improve his approach, represents internal teaching. The film could show this reflective practice, characters thinking critically about their performance and adjusting accordingly. This self-directed learning is as important as external mentorship. Gandalf's role extends beyond individual mentorship to stewarding Middle-earth's resistance to darkness. He coordinates knowledge between different peoples, ensures crucial information isn't lost, maintains continuity of purpose across generations and cultures. This meta-level mentorship, teaching institutions rather than just individuals, amplifies his impact far beyond what direct teaching alone could achieve. The film should show mentorship as reciprocal. Aragorn learns from Gandalf but also teaches the wizard about human perspectives and capabilities. Younger rangers offer fresh insights that Aragorn incorporates into his thinking. Even Gollum, through his negative example, teaches observers about corruption's effects. Knowledge flows in multiple directions, and wise beings remain open to learning regardless of their expertise. There's bittersweet recognition that mentorship is necessary because individuals are temporary. Elves have the luxury of individual continuity across ages, but humans must pass knowledge forward or lose it. The Dunedain Ranger tradition, maintained through teaching despite constant loss of experienced members, exemplifies this human necessity. The film could explore this theme, showing how mortal beings create immortality through transmitted knowledge and values. The evolution of evil. Different forms of darkness. This film provides opportunity to explore how evil manifests in different forms throughout Middle-earth, from the cosmic to the personal, and how characters must confront these varied threats. Sauron represents absolute evil, cosmic and impersonal. He's not motivated by understandable human desires but by a fundamental will to dominate and order all things under his control. The film could show his influence as something almost geological, a force of nature that corrupts everything it touches. He doesn't hate individuals, he simply wants to subjugate all things. This makes him terrifying in an abstract way, not a person to reason with but a condition to resist. The orcs represent corrupted and weaponized evil. They were twisted from other beings, their natural impulses perverted into cruelty and destruction. The film could show them as simultaneously victims and perpetrators, creatures who suffer under Sauron's dominion, while also gleefully inflicting suffering on others. This complexity makes them more than simple monsters. They're products of evil systems that warp natural beings into tools of darkness. Gollum embodies personal evil born from temptation and weakness. He wasn't inherently wicked. He was a hobbit who made terrible choices when presented with the ring. His evil is recognizable and human, the evil of addiction, of obsession, of selfishness taken to its logical extreme. The film should emphasize that Gollum could have been any of us under similar circumstances, making his tragedy more resonant and frightening. Saruman, though perhaps only glimpsed, represents intellectual evil, the corruption of wisdom and knowledge into tools of manipulation and domination. His evil is more subtle than Sauron's, disguised as reason and progress. He believes he's being clever, playing both sides, but he's really just serving darkness while telling himself he's in control. This self-deception is its own form of evil. The environmental corruption, the spreading darkness that turns greenwood into mirkwood, represents ecological evil. This is evil that destroys natural beauty and balance, that poisons ecosystems and turns healthy lands into wastelands. The film could show this as gradual and insidious, trees slowly dying, streams running foul, the incremental degradation that's easy to ignore until it's too late. There's also structural evil, the way systems and institutions can become corrupted. Gondor under Denethor is beginning this slide, with the steward's paranoia and despair gradually infecting the realm's governance. The film might touch on this briefly, showing how individual corruption spreads through organizations, how institutional decay begins with personal failures. The film could contrast these different evils to show their relationships. Sauron's cosmic evil enables and amplifies the others. He provides the structure that organizes orc cruelty into military force. He offers the ring that corrupts Gollum. He seduces Saruman with promises of power. All the smaller evils connect back to this central source, showing how darkness has both grand and intimate manifestations. Understanding these different forms helps contextualize the hunt's importance. Stopping Gollum from revealing the ring's location prevents Sauron's cosmic evil from achieving total victory. Protecting against orc raids preserves innocent lives from corrupted evil's immediate threat. Maintaining vigilance against creeping darkness resists environmental evil's spread. The hunt operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The film should also show resistance to evil taking different forms. Aragorn's dutiful persistence, Gandalf's wisdom and coordination, the Dunedain's unglamorous daily vigilance, Thranduil's grudging cooperation despite personal preference. the common people's simple determination to live good lives despite threats. All these represent different modes of resistance that together hold darkness at bay. There's a question about whether evil can be redeemed or must be destroyed. Gollum raises this explicitly, a corrupted being who still has flickers of his original self. The film's approach to him, imprisonment rather than execution, suggests belief in some potential for redemption, however slim. But this mercy is also pragmatic. Gandalf needs information only Gollum can provide. These mixed motives reflect the complexity of dealing with evil in forms that were once good. The untold stories. Side characters and their fates. Every major story has side characters whose own tales intersect briefly with the main narrative, and giving attention to these peripheral figures enriches the world and adds human dimension to epic events. There would be rangers who play supporting roles in the hunt. Perhaps a young Dunedain assigned to watch a potential route Gollum might take, spending weeks alone in dangerous territory. We might see his daily routine, his fear and boredom, his relief when finally recalled because Gollum went a different direction. His story is tiny compared to Aragorn's, but it's his whole experience, his weeks of life spent in service of something larger. The film could show a village elder who encounters Gollum briefly and reports it to Aragorn. This elder doesn't understand the significance of what he saw, doesn't know he's contributing to preventing apocalypse. He just knows a strange creature passed through and the ranger was asking about it. His life continues normally after this intersection, unaware of how his small action mattered. This represents how ordinary people contribute to extraordinary events without ever knowing. There might be an elf guard in Mirkwood who becomes particularly troubled by Gollum's presence. Perhaps this elf lost family to orcs and seeing another victim of darkness, even one as corrupted as Gollum, affects him deeply. His story could parallel Gollum's imprisonment, showing how guarding this prisoner changes the guards themselves, challenging their beliefs about justice and mercy. A trader or merchant might encounter Aragorn multiple times during the hunt, their paths crossing in different towns. Each meeting shows Aragorn more worn, more focused, and the merchant wonders what drives the strange ranger but never learns the truth. Years later, when Aragorn is crowned king, perhaps this merchant recognizes him and realizes the grim ranger from those encounters has become royalty, finally understanding he witnessed something significant. There could be orc commanders on Sauron's side who are hunting Gollum with equal dedication. The film might briefly show their perspective, the pressure they face from their dark master, their own tracking efforts, their frustration at always being just behind their quarry. When they fail to recapture Gollum, there are consequences, punishments in Mordor that we don't need to see but can imagine. These orcs have their own stories, twisted and dark, but still stories of beings caught in larger events. A Dunedain ranger might die during the hunt, killed by orcs in an ambush that was meant to capture Aragorn. His wife back home waits for word that never comes, eventually understanding he's not returning. Her grief is private and unknown to most, but it's real and permanent. The film showing even briefly these ripple effects of loss makes the stakes feel human and immediate. The film could include a minstrel or storyteller who hears fragments of the hunt through rumors and begins constructing a ballad. But the information is incomplete and distorted, so the story he creates bears little resemblance to truth. This shows how myths form, how real events become legends, and how quickly truth is obscured by telling and retelling. Decades later, some version of this ballad might survive while the real events are forgotten. An innkeeper who gives Aragorn shelter might have a brief conversation with him, sensing the weight this ranger carries. She offers what comfort she can, a hot meal and a safe bed, not knowing she's helping someone on a mission of cosmic importance. Her kindness is small but meaningful, representing how ordinary compassion supports extraordinary endeavors. These side characters and their micronarratives prevent the story from feeling too narrow. They show that even in a focused hunt, there's a web of people affected, contributing, changed by events. They represent the countless stories that intersect with known history but rarely get told, validating the experiences of those who aren't heroes but who participate in and are shaped by heroic events. Legacy. The hunt's place in history. The final thematic element to explore is how the hunt for Gollum fits into Middle-earth's larger historical narrative, and what its legacy means for future generations. In the immediate term, the hunt buys time, crucial years where Gandalf can research, where preparations can be made, where the ring's location remains uncertain to Sauron. Without this buffer, events might have unfolded too quickly for the Free Peoples to respond effectively. The hunt's success creates the conditions that make Frodo's quest possible, though few will ever know this. Historically, the hunt will likely remain obscure. History remembers armies and battles, not lone rangers tracking creatures through wilderness. Aragorn's contribution during this period won't appear in songs or chronicles. This obscurity is typical of truly crucial intelligence operations. The most important work often happens in shadow and stays there. The film could acknowledge this irony, that one of the most consequential events leading to Sauron's defeat will be forgotten. For the Dunedain, the hunt becomes part of their oral tradition. Rangers who survived tell younger generations about the mission, using it as teaching example of persistence, skill, and dedication to duty. The specifics might become embellished over generations, but the core story endures within the ranger tradition, even if nowhere else. The hunt establishes patterns of cooperation that serve well during the War of the Ring. Gandalf coordinating between Free Peoples, using rangers as operatives, securing aid through personal relationships rather than formal treaties. These methods proved effective during the hunt and become templates for later resistance efforts. The organizational framework survives even if the specific mission is forgotten. For Aragorn personally, the hunt is a defining experience that shapes his kingship. When he eventually rules, his policies reflect lessons learned during those years. His respect for intelligence gathering, his appreciation for unglamorous necessary work, his understanding of strategic patience, his tendency to personally investigate important matters rather than always delegating, these traits have roots in the hunt. The hunt also represents something larger about Middle-earth's Third Age, the constant struggle to contain evil through vigilance and effort. The Dunedain, the elves, the wizards, all working to prevent catastrophe through daily unglamorous effort. The hunt is one example of this larger pattern, emblematic of countless unnamed struggles that preserve peace and allow simple folk to live safely. There's tragic dimension to this legacy. All the effort, sacrifice, and success of the hunt ultimately leads to Gollum escaping and becoming instrumental in the ring's destruction. In a strange way, the hunt is necessary for the ring's destruction, because Gollum must be alive and available to accompany Frodo and Sam. Providence works through failure as well as success, using even mistakes to achieve necessary outcomes. The film could end with a meditation on legacy and memory. Perhaps an elderly ranger, decades later, stands in a landscape where something important happened during the hunt. The location is unchanged, indifferent to the drama that unfolded there. The ranger remembers fallen comrades, remembers the tension and fear, knows that what happened here mattered even if no one else remembers. This quiet moment validates the importance of work done in obscurity. This connects to larger themes about how history works. Official histories record kings and battles, but countless unnamed individuals make choices and take actions that determine outcomes. The hunt for Gollum represents all these forgotten contributions, suggesting that history is made as much by obscure trackers and vigilant guards as by the famous figures who get remembered. The role of chance. Luck in the hunt. While skill and determination drive the hunt, luck and chance play significant roles, and acknowledging this adds realism and dramatic unpredictability to the story. There are moments where Aragorn gets lucky. Maybe he arrives at a village hours after Gollum passed through, and someone happened to see the strange creature. Or he finds tracks just before rain would have washed them away. Or he takes a particular route on intuition and stumbles onto fresh signs. These fortunate moments are necessary. Middle-earth is vast, and pure skill alone couldn't guarantee success. The film should acknowledge these lucky breaks without diminishing Aragorn's abilities. Gollum also experiences luck, both good and bad. Perhaps he escapes a trap because an opportune rainstorm creates cover for his movement. Or he's unlucky, needing to cross open ground just as the moon breaks through clouds, making him visible. These chance elements add tension because audiences understand that even skilled characters are subject to random events they can't control. The film could show characters acknowledging luck's role. Maybe Aragorn, Upon finding a crucial clue, pauses and looks skyward in something like thanks, recognizing he was fortunate. Or perhaps a fellow ranger comments on a narrow escape, attributing it to luck rather than skill. This honesty about fortune's role makes characters more relatable and humble. Weather is the most obvious source of chance. Storms that help or hinder, fog that conceals or confuses, unexpected cold snaps or heat waves that affect travel. These environmental variables are beyond anyone's control but dramatically affect outcomes. The film could use weather as almost a character itself, an unpredictable force that both sides must navigate. There's also the chance of random encounters. Perhaps Aragorn meets a traveling merchant who happened to see something relevant, pure coincidence that provides crucial information. Or Gollum nearly stumbles into an orc patrol that wasn't supposed to be in that area, forcing him to change plans. These random elements reflect how real pursuits are rarely clean and linear. The film might explore near misses where luck is the only differentiator. Aragorn searches a cave system just hours after Gollum has left. Gollum hides in bushes while Aragorn walks past, close enough to touch, and pure chance means Aragorn doesn't look in that exact direction. These moments create tremendous tension while highlighting how fine the margin between success and failure can be. There's philosophical dimension to luck in Tolkien's world. Is it really chance, or is it providence? Gandalf would probably argue that what seems like luck is actually a larger design at work, that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, implying agency behind apparent randomness. The film could let characters debate this without resolving it definitively, allowing audiences to interpret events through their own philosophical lens. The role of timing is crucial and often luck-dependent. Aragorn beginning the hunt when he does, Gollum choosing certain routes, the convergence of their paths, these all depend partly on timing that neither controls. If Aragorn had started the hunt a week later, Gollum might have already reached safer territory. If Gollum had gone east instead of south, they might never have intersected. These temporal coincidences are both lucky and essential. Acknowledging luck's role doesn't diminish the story, it enriches it. It shows that even in a world with prophecy and destiny, random chance still operates, keeps outcomes uncertain and suspenseful. It makes success feel earned but also fortunate. Characters did everything right and caught necessary breaks. This combination of skill and fortune feels true to how actual high-stakes endeavors unfold. The film could contrast characters' attitudes toward luck. Aragorn might view fortunate moments as blessings to be grateful for but not relied upon, maintaining effort regardless. Gollum might see bad luck as persecution, proof the world is against him, feeding his paranoia and victimhood. These different relationships with chance reveal character and worldview. Predator and prey. Psychological profiles. The hunt creates a predator-prey dynamic that's psychologically complex and worth exploring in depth, because both Aragorn and Gollum occupy these roles in different ways. Aragorn is the obvious predator, pursuing with intent and greater resources. But he lacks crucial information about his quarry's exact location and must work to close that gap. His psychology is one of patience and persistence, knowing that careful, methodical pursuit eventually corners even the most elusive prey. He can't afford to become frustrated or desperate, emotions that lead to mistakes. The film could show him managing his emotional state, using techniques to stay calm and focus through weeks of setbacks. Gollum is prey, but highly intelligent prey that thinks tactically about survival. His psychology is dominated by fear, but also by cunning born from centuries of avoiding dangers in the misty mountains. He's constantly calculating risks, deciding when to run, when to hide, when to freeze. The film could show his decision-making process, perhaps through his internal dialogue between Smeagol and Gollum, debating strategies for survival. There's an interesting reversal where Gollum sometimes becomes predator. He hunts fish with deadly efficiency, strangling them with techniques honed over centuries. If cornered by someone weaker than Aragorn, he might attack rather than flee. This duality, prey that can become predator when circumstances allow, makes him more complex and dangerous than simple quarry. The psychological toll of being hunted is severe. Gollum can never fully relax, never feel safe. Every sound might be pursuit. Every shadow might hide danger. This constant hypervigilance is exhausting, wearing down mental and physical reserves. The film could show this through his deteriorating condition, increasing paranoia, more erratic behavior as the hunt progresses. Aragorn faces his own psychological challenges as predator. There's the moral weight of hunting a sentient being, even one as corrupted as Gollum. There's the frustration of near misses and lost trails. There's the pressure of knowing failure could doom Middle-earth. These stresses accumulate, and the film could show Aragorn developing coping mechanisms, rituals, or mental techniques that help him maintain equilibrium. The relationship between hunter and hunted becomes strangely intimate over time. Aragorn learns Gollum's patterns, his preferences, his fears. In a sense, he comes to know Gollum better than anyone else alive. Gollum, though he might not see Aragorn clearly, knows he's being hunted by someone relentless and skilled. This creates a connection between them, adversarial but profound, that culminates in the capture. There's also the question of obsession. Does Aragorn become too focused on Gollum, losing perspective on why the hunt matters? Does Gollum become so consumed with escape that he makes poor decisions? The film could explore how obsession affects both characters, clouding judgment and distorting priorities. This psychological hazard makes the hunt more than physical challenge. It's a mental endurance test. The film might draw on real predator-prey dynamics from nature. The way Aragorn narrows possibilities, cutting off escape routes, herding Gollum toward areas where capture is more feasible, mirrors how wolves hunt or how birds of prey corner their targets. Showing this tactical progression educates audiences about hunting dynamics while creating narrative structure. There's terror in being prey that the film should convey. The film could use point-of-view shots from Gollum's perspective, showing the world as threatening and hostile. Every possible hiding place also a potential trap, every choice weighted with life or death consequences. This creates sympathy even for an unsympathetic character, helping audiences understand his desperation. The psychological contrast between the two characters illuminates their natures. Aragorn hunts from duty and maintains his humanity throughout. Gollum flees from survival instinct, his humanity mostly already gone. The hunt strips both down to essentials, revealing character through action and decision under extreme pressure. This creates a character study disguised as adventure story. The aftermath. Lasting impacts on characters. The hunt doesn't end with Gollum's imprisonment. It leaves lasting marks on everyone involved, and exploring these long-term impacts adds depth to understanding what the mission cost. Aragorn emerges changed in fundamental ways. He's more confident in his leadership abilities, having successfully completed an incredibly difficult mission. But he's also seen and done things that trouble him, made compromises with his ideals, witnessed suffering he couldn't prevent. The film could show these contradictory impacts: growth purchased through trauma, wisdom gained through loss. The psychological scars might not be obvious but would affect his later decisions. His understanding of what the ring can do to people, learned through months of studying Gollum, informs how he treats Frodo and the ring in Fellowship. His increased caution around powerful artifacts, his insistence on certain security measures, his paranoia about being followed, these behaviors have roots in the hunt. Physically, Aragorn bears marks. Scars from encounters with orcs or dangerous terrain. Perhaps an injury that never fully healed, that aches in cold weather. These physical reminders of the hunt stay with him, literal embodiment of the mission's cost. The film might show him touching an old scar while making a decision years later, the memory influencing the present. His relationships are affected. Other Dunedain who served with him during the hunt share experiences that bind them closer. But rangers who died create absences he feels constantly. When he later leads in the War of the Ring, he carries memory of those losses, determination not to waste the sacrifices made during the hunt and other unnamed battles. Gandalf also bears the weight of the hunt's aftermath. He knows how close everything came to disaster, how many things had to go right for success. This knowledge makes him more cautious in some ways, more desperate in others. His increasingly urgent tone in Fellowship stems partly from lessons learned during the hunt, understanding how quickly things can go catastrophically wrong. The wizard's guilt about later events is complex. When Gollum escapes, Gandalf might blame himself for not implementing better security, for not staying in Mirkwood to personally oversee the imprisonment. This guilt drives his actions, making him more hands-on, less willing to delegate crucial tasks. The film could show the origins of this guilt, planting seeds for his later behavior. For Gollum, imprisonment fundamentally alters his psychology. Years in captivity, watched constantly, unable to hunt or roam, would change anyone, and for someone as damaged as Gollum, the impact is profound. The film could end by showing Gollum's state after months or years imprisoned, how the experience has affected him, making him even more paranoid, more desperate, more willing to do anything for freedom. His relationship with the precious becomes more obsessive during imprisonment. With nothing else to focus on, his entire mental energy fixates on the ring, memories of it, fantasies about recovering it, hatred for those who keep him from it. This concentrated obsession is what makes him so dangerous when he eventually escapes and so useful to Frodo and Sam as guide. His obsession with the ring lets him sense it from a distance. Thranduil's aftermath is political and psychological. The successful imprisonment, followed by the escape, affects his reputation and his own self-perception. He helped when asked, tried his best, but ultimately failed to keep Gollum contained. This failure might reinforce his isolationist tendencies, confirming his suspicion that involvement with outside problems brings only trouble. The woodland realm itself is changed. The orc raid that enables Gollum's escape causes casualties and damage. Elves who died defending their realm, beautiful areas of forest destroyed in fighting. These losses are permanent. The film could show the aftermath, scorched trees and burial mounds, reminders that even trying to help has consequences. Environmental storytelling. Reading the landscape. Beyond dialogue and explicit narrative, the film can tell stories through environment, using locations to convey history, character, and theme without words. The Dead Marshes are environmental storytelling at its most powerful. The faces visible in the water tell story of ancient battle without needing exposition. Aragorn's careful navigation through this treacherous landscape shows his skill, while the environment itself communicates danger and history. Every frame in the marshes should be dense with storytelling information. Mirkwood's corruption tells story of Dol Gulder's influence. Healthy forest at the borders gradually transitions to twisted, dark woodland deeper in. Trees that should be vibrant are dying or dead. The very air becomes oppressive. This gradual transformation communicates how evil spreads, not suddenly but incrementally, corrupting everything it touches over time. Ruins of ancient structures throughout Middle-earth tell stories of fallen kingdoms and forgotten ages. Perhaps Aragorn passes old watchtowers of Arnor, now crumbling and overgrown. These ruins need no explanation to communicate that this land once held greater civilization now declined. They speak to themes of decay and loss that pervade Middle-earth's Third Age. The film could use settlements to show gradual impact of growing darkness. Early in the hunt, villages are relatively prosperous and secure. Later, as Aragorn tracks Gollum east toward Mordor, settlements become more fortified, more fearful, showing populations responding to increasing danger. This environmental progression charts the rising threat without requiring explicit statements. Weather tells emotional and thematic stories. Storm during particularly desperate hunt sequence mirrors Aragorn's internal turmoil. Fog creating uncertainty when he's close to capturing Gollum builds tension. Beautiful clear day when something terrible happens creates ironic contrast. These environmental choices aren't random but serve narrative and emotional purposes. The paths and roads Aragorn travels reveal history and current state of regions. Well-maintained roads suggest functioning governance and safety. Overgrown paths indicate abandonment or danger. The absence of roads entirely shows wilderness where civilization has never taken hold or has retreated. These environmental details communicate political and social realities efficiently. Animal presence or absence tells stories. Regions near Mordor have fewer birds, and those present seem wrong somehow, corrupted or unnatural. Healthy forests teem with wildlife that Aragorn uses for hunting. These ecological details show environmental health while providing Aragorn resources or challenges. Architecture speaks to culture and values. Elvish structures in Mirkwood should feel organic, integrated with forest, reflecting elves' relationship with nature. Human settlements are more utilitarian, focused on defense and function. Orc constructions are deliberately ugly and brutal, showing that their builders value different things. These design choices tell cultural stories visually. The film could use color grading to create environmental storytelling. Regions closer to corrupted areas might have muted, sickly color palettes. Safer areas have richer, more vibrant colors. This subtle visual shift helps audiences feel safety or danger without conscious awareness, operating on subconscious level to create mood. Battle sites and evidence of violence tell recent history. Aragorn finding burned village or site of orc attack shows the war happening at society's margins. These discoveries aren't plot points necessarily, just environmental details that communicate the constant low-level warfare the Dunedain fight to protect the innocent from. The changing seasons, if the film shows passage of time, provide natural environmental storytelling. Autumn's decay mirrors themes of Middle-earth's declining age. Winter's harshness tests Aragorn's endurance. Spring's renewal might coincide with successful capture, suggesting hope. Summer's growth could show time passing during imprisonment. These seasonal changes add rhythm and meaning beyond simple time passage. Natural obstacles tell stories about characters through how they're overcome. Mountain pass that seems impassable tests determination. Raging river creates choice point about whether to risk crossing or lose time finding safe passage. These environmental challenges aren't arbitrary. They reveal character through how individuals respond to natural world's demands. The significance of names, identity and power. Names carry profound significance in Tolkien's work, and this film can explore how naming relates to identity, power, and recognition. Aragorn has multiple names, each revealing different aspects of identity. Aragorn is his true name, given at birth, connecting him to his ancestry and destiny. Estel, meaning hope, was his name during childhood among elves, reflecting his role as last hope of his line. Strider is the name he uses as ranger, focusing on his function rather than identity. The film could explore when and why he uses each name, what it reveals or conceals. There's power in knowing someone's true name. When Gandalf addresses Aragorn by his full name and titles, it acknowledges his full identity and destiny. When Aragorn introduces himself as Strider to strangers, he's controlling information and maintaining safety. This strategic naming shows intelligence and caution appropriate to someone operating in dangerous circumstances. Gollum's name itself is significant. Gollum is the sound he makes, the corruption giving him new identity that replaces his original name Smeagol. But Smeagol isn't entirely gone. The name persists in his split personality. When characters call him one name or the other, they're recognizing different aspects of his divided self. Gandalf or Aragorn using Smeagol might be an attempt to reach the person he was, acknowledging his former identity. The film could include a moment where someone asks Gollum his real name, and his response is confused and distressed. He might say Smeagol hesitantly, or insist he's Gollum or both. This confusion about basic identity question reveals his fractured state more effectively than lengthy exposition about his psychology. Places have names that tell histories. Mirkwood was once Greenwood the Great, renamed after corruption darkened it. The dead marsh's name tells their story. Dol Guldur means Hill of Sorcery, announcing its evil. The film using correct names while occasionally mentioning old names adds historical depth and shows how corruption changes even what we call things. The Dunedain as a name means Men of the West, connecting them to their Númenórean ancestry and the fallen kingdom of Arnor. Using this name rather than just rangers emphasizes their heritage and the pride they maintain despite diminished circumstances. Its act of resistance against being forgotten by history. Personal names in Middle-earth often have meanings that relate to character or destiny. The film could briefly explore this, perhaps through Gandalf explaining something about names' meanings in different languages. This adds linguistic richness while giving audiences insight into Tolkien's world-building depth. There's question of what Aragorn is called by those closest to him. Does Gandalf use Aragorn or does he have a more familiar form? Do fellow Dunedain have nicknames or use his formal name out of respect? These choices reveal relationship dynamics and cultural practices around naming. The refusal to speak certain names has power too. Perhaps Sauron is referred to as the enemy or the Dark Lord, avoiding his name either from fear or from refusal to give him that recognition. The Nazgul might be unnamed, referred to only as the Nine or Ringwraiths, their individual identities erased by their service to darkness. The film could show naming as form of recognition and respect. When Aragorn learns a ranger's name who died in service, speaking that name aloud honors the fallen. When someone's name is forgotten, they're truly erased from memory. This connects to themes about who gets remembered in history and why. Gollum's inability to remember other names or people shows how isolation and obsession erode even basic social memory. He probably can't recall names of family members, friends from his past life, anyone who knew him as Smeagol. This amnesia is both symptom and cause of his corruption, cutting him off from all relationships and social context. The power of being unnamed or refusing name creates mystery and fear. Perhaps during the hunt, Aragorn encounters someone who won't give their name, immediately raising suspicion. Or Gollum refuses to speak names of places or people, his paranoia making him withhold even basic information that might seem harmless. Fan theories and speculation. Engaging with the audience. Part of what makes beloved franchises endure is fan engagement, including theories and speculation about untold stories. This film can acknowledge and engage with fan culture in interesting ways. There are existing fan theories about the hunt for Gollum that the film might reference or confirm. Did Aragorn have help from unexpected sources? Were there near captures that aren't recorded? Did Gollum's path cross with other significant characters? The film can validate fan speculation by incorporating ideas that fit organically with established lore. Some fans have speculated about what Gollum did during his decades of freedom after escaping Bilbo. The film could provide glimpses of this, showing places he went or things he did that explain his state when captured. This rewards dedicated fans who've thought deeply about timeline gaps while remaining accessible to casual viewers. There's fan interest in the Dunedain culture and operations. How do they communicate across distances? What's their organizational structure? Where do they live when not ranging? The film, including details that answer these questions, shows respect for fan curiosity while enriching the world for everyone watching. The relationship between Aragorn and Arwen is fan favorite, and while Arwen isn't directly in this story, the film could include brief references. Maybe Aragorn carries a token from her, or mentions her to Gandalf. Small touches that acknowledge the relationship exists during this time frame without derailing the plot. Fan artists and writers have created extensive content imagining untold Middle-earth stories. The film's production design could draw inspiration from particularly excellent fan works, a form of dialogue between official adaptation and fan creativity. This honors the community that's kept Middle-earth alive between official releases. There's speculation about whether Saruman interfered with the hunt more actively than Tolkien described. The film could validate this by including subtle hints of his involvement, satisfying fans who've theorized about this while not overcomplicating the story for those unfamiliar with these ideas. Easter eggs for dedicated fans could be hidden throughout. A ranger mentioning someone who could be a known character's ancestor. A location that will be significant in later stories. These don't need to be obvious or explained. They're rewards for attentive fans who know the lore deeply. The film can engage with fan debates about character motivations and moral questions. Was Thranduil right to help, or should he have refused? Was imprisoning Gollum merciful or cruel? By presenting these questions thoughtfully, the film validates that fans have been thinking seriously about these issues. Social media and fan spaces will immediately start analyzing every frame when the film releases. The filmmakers, knowing this, can plant subtle details that reward that analysis. A symbol that calls back to ancient Numenor. A line of Elvish that has layered meaning. These details create longevity, encouraging multiple viewings and deep discussion. There's balance between serving hardcore fans and remaining accessible to general audiences. The film must work for someone seeing it as their first Middle-earth content while also rewarding the person who's read every appendix. This dual audience creates challenges but also opportunities for different layers of appreciation. Fan theories sometimes become so widespread they're almost canonical in fan consciousness. If the film contradicts popular fan theories, that needs to be done carefully with awareness that some fans may have headcanon they're attached to. If it confirms theories, that's satisfying but must feel organic rather than just fan service. The film could acknowledge its own position in fandom by including metatextual moments that work on multiple levels. A comment about how stories grow in the telling could reference both in-universe oral tradition and real-world way this franchise has expanded. These subtle fourth-wall acknowledgments can create deeper connection with audience. The therapeutic power of stories. Why we need this. Finally, let's consider why audiences might need this story now, what psychological and emotional needs it serves. Because good stories aren't just entertainment but fulfill deeper human requirements. Stories about persistence through difficulty resonate particularly in times when people feel overwhelmed. Aragorn's months-long hunt, his refusal to give up despite setbacks, models perseverance that audiences might need to see. The film showing that success often comes from steady effort rather than sudden victory provides counter-narrative to instant gratification culture. The theme of doing necessary work without recognition speaks to many people's lives. Teachers, healthcare workers, parents, caregivers, all doing essential labor that rarely gets acknowledged. Seeing Aragorn undertake crucial mission knowing he won't be celebrated validates that unglamorous necessary work has value even without external reward. Stories about community and mutual support provide comfort in isolating times. The Dunedain Brotherhood, Gandalf's coordination between peoples, the cooperation between rangers and elves, all these model how challenges are faced together. This reminds audiences that even when feeling alone, we're part of larger networks of people working toward shared goods. Gollum's story, while tragic, explores addiction and corruption in ways that might resonate with people dealing with these issues personally or through loved ones. Seeing someone trapped by obsession, losing themselves to consumption, but also seeing others treat them with mixture of caution and compassion, might provide framework for thinking about real-world situations. The film's acknowledgement that good people can make difficult choices and live with consequences provides ethical complexity. Aragorn must do hard things for right reasons. Thranduil helps despite preference not to. These stories of moral compromise without corruption model how to maintain integrity while accepting that perfect choices rarely exist. Environmental themes about corruption spreading and nature being damaged resonate with climate anxiety. Seeing characters fight to preserve beauty and health against spreading darkness might provide hope that resistance is possible, that individuals can make difference even when facing systemic threats. The story's emphasis on preparation and vigilance has relevance for many contemporary concerns. The Dunedain are always watching, always ready, maintaining security that allows others to live peacefully. This validates both those who do protective work and those who benefit from it, acknowledging interdependence and shared responsibility. Stories set in the past that influence the future help us think about legacy and long-term impact. The hunt's consequences unfold over years, and characters don't always know how their choices matter. This encourages taking long view, understanding that our actions have effects beyond immediate results. The film's potential to show different forms of strength, physical and mental, emotional and spiritual, validates that heroism comes in many forms. Not everyone can be Aragorn the warrior, but everyone can be persistent, dutiful, compassionate. This inclusive view of strength empowers broader audience. Fantasy provides safe distance to process real anxieties. Darkness spreading across Middle-earth can represent any number of contemporary fears, but because it's fantasy, audiences can engage without becoming too triggered or overwhelmed. The distance allows processing that direct engagement might not. Stories about found family and chosen communities resonate with people whose biological families aren't supportive or available. The Dunedain Brotherhood, rangers who chose this life together, models how people can create meaningful bonds based on shared values rather than blood relations. The therapeutic value of watching competence and skill is significant. Seeing Aragorn track expertly, Gandalf coordinate effectively, the Dunedain function as cohesive unit, provides satisfaction in watching people who are good at what they do. This mastery is increasingly rare in media focused on conflict and failure. Conclusion: why this story matters. So after this deep dive into every aspect of the hunt for Gollum, let's bring it all together and talk about why this story deserves to be told, and why it matters to the larger tapestry of Middle-earth. This film has the potential to be something truly special, not just another fantasy adventure, but a meditation on duty, sacrifice, and the unglamorous heroism that actually keeps the world safe. We live in an era obsessed with spectacle and scale, with universe-ending threats and cosmic battles. But the hunt for Gollum reminds us that sometimes the most important work is quiet, difficult, and thankless. Aragorn tracking one wretched creature across Middle-earth for months or years isn't as visually spectacular as the Battle of Helm's Deep. But it's arguably more important. Without this hunt, without Aragorn's persistence and Gandalf's coordination, the entire quest to destroy the ring could have failed before it began. Sauron would have learned where the ring was, the Nazgul would have descended on the Shire, and Frodo would never have made it to Rivendell. What makes this story resonate is its intimacy. We're not watching armies clash or kingdoms fall. We're watching one man, exhausted and isolated, continuing to put one foot in front of the other because he made a promise and because the work needs doing. That's heroism most of us can actually relate to. We're not going to lead armies or save kingdoms, but we can persist in difficult tasks, can do necessary work without recognition, can serve purposes larger than ourselves. The psychological depth this film could explore is remarkable. Aragorn's transformation from competent ranger to future king happens through this crucible. Gollum's tragedy becomes more poignant when we see him as hunted creature, desperately trying to survive, rather than just obstacle in the hero's path. Gandalf's burden of knowledge, having to coordinate resistance to darkness while knowing how close everything is to catastrophe, adds weight to every decision. And the world-building possibilities are extraordinary. This film could take us to locations we've never properly seen. The dead marshes in their full haunted glory, the depths of corrupted Mirkwood, the brown lands and other forgotten places. It could show us the Dunedain Brotherhood in detail, finally giving proper screen time to these rangers who've protected the North in obscurity for generations. It could explore how different peoples and cultures respond to gathering darkness in their own ways. The themes are timeless and relevant. How do we maintain hope when fighting seems futile? What does it cost to guard against threats others don't even know exist? How do we balance mercy with security? These questions don't have easy answers, and the film respecting that complexity would elevate it beyond simple good versus evil storytelling. For fans of Tolkien's work, this film represents something we've wanted for decades. A chance to see stories from the vast appendices and background material brought to life. The hunt for Gollum is referenced in the books but never shown in detail. It's a gap in the narrative that's tantalizing precisely because we know it matters but don't know exactly how it unfolded. This film can finally answer those questions while asking new ones. The technical and artistic challenges of making this film are significant, but they're also exciting. How do you maintain tension when audiences know the outcome? How do you make tracking and pursuit cinematically engaging for 2+ hours? How do you balance the intimate character study with the epic scope of Middle-earth? These challenges, if met successfully, could produce something genuinely innovative in the fantasy genre. Andy Serkis directing and starring gives this project immediate credibility. He understands Gollum better than anyone, having brought the character to life in the original trilogy. His directorial work has shown he can handle complex material with sensitivity and skill. If anyone can make this story work, it's someone who's already proven they understand Middle-earth at a deep level. And let's talk about what success would mean for future Middle-earth projects. If this film works, if audiences embrace this more intimate, character-focused approach, it opens doors for other untold stories. There are decades and centuries of Middle-earth history that could be explored. The fall of Arnor, the war against Angmar, Gandalf's travels, countless other narratives waiting to be told. This film could be proof of concept that Middle-earth stories don't need to be world-ending epics to be compelling. The hunt for Gollum sits at this fascinating intersection. It's a prequel that enriches the original trilogy without being dependent on it. It's an action film that's also a character study. It's intimate in scale but cosmic in implications. It's both a self-contained story and part of a larger tapestry. Getting all these elements to work together is ambitious, but the potential payoff is enormous. What I'm most excited about is the possibility of seeing Middle-earth treated with the depth and respect it deserves. Tolkien created this world with incredible detail, and every element has history and meaning. A film that engages with that depth, that trusts audiences to appreciate complexity and nuance, that doesn't feel the need to dumb things down or simplify them, that would be something special. This story reminds us why we fell in love with Middle-earth in the first place. Not because of the spectacle, though that's wonderful, but because of the characters who feel real, the moral weight of their choices, the sense that this is a world with depth and history, where actions have consequences and choices matter. The Hunt for Gollum, done right, could recapture that magic while showing us something new. So whether you're a die-hard Tolkien scholar who's read every appendix and draft, or a casual fan who just loves the movies, this film has something to offer. It's a chance to return to Middle-earth, to spend time with characters we love, to see new corners of this world, and to be reminded of what makes great storytelling work. It's about persistence, about duty, about doing what's necessary even when it's difficult and thankless. And ultimately, isn't that what heroism really looks like? Not grand gestures and glorious battles, though those have their place, but the daily choice to continue, to serve, to do what's right even when no one's watching and no one will remember. Aragorn tracking Gollum through the wilderness embodies that kind of heroism, and we need stories that celebrate it. The Hunt for Gollum has all the pieces to be something remarkable. Whether it achieves that potential depends on execution, but the foundation is there in Tolkien's work and in the passion of the people bringing it to life. And when it arrives in theaters, we'll all be ready to return to Middle-earth once more, to take this journey we've never quite seen before, to discover how one patient hunter and one desperate creature shaped the fate of an entire world. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, everyone. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me what aspect of the Hunt for Gollum you're most excited to see. And remember, the story of Middle-earth is far from over. Until next time, rest well.